Picture two payments leaving two accounts at the exact same time. Same bank rails, same clean little confirmation screen, same tiny animation sliding to the right like nothing important is happening. But if you freeze the frame and look lower, all the way at the bottom, past the amount, past the little note, past the date, there is a line almost nobody reads. Approved by, signature on file, authorization source. Whatever your system happens to call it, the meaning is the same. This dollar is not moving because it woke up this morning feeling inspired. It is moving because an instruction was written earlier, approved earlier, and now, without asking for your opinion again, it is executing. That is the part I want you to sit with. Money does not just disappear. It obeys. It follows instructions. And the quality of your financial life depends much more than most people realize on one very boring question. Whose name is at the bottom of the instruction? Yours or the person getting paid? That is the whole episode. Not budgeting in the generic way people say budgeting when they mean guilt. Not hustle harder. Not grind for 20 more years and hope your calendar eventually forgives you. Just this. When money moves, whose hand actually wrote the order? Because if the instruction was truly yours, really yours, deliberately yours, signed by the version of you that cared about your future more than your mood, that dollar can build a life quietly for decades. And if the instruction was smuggled in by hype, urgency, status, convenience, or a giant number somebody profitable shouted through a microphone, that same dollar can spend you before you even feel it happen. Today, I want to show you the same mistake at two completely different speeds. One takes 30 years. The other takes one summer. The first person never looked rich while it was working. The second person thought he was stepping into the big event of a lifetime. Both were really just running instructions. One person signed her own. The other one ran somebody else's. And by the end, the gap is not subtle. It is violent. It is the kind of gap people like to explain with luck because luck is emotionally convenient. It lets you avoid the paperwork. But this was not luck. It was authorship. It was the signature line. Welcome back to Modern Wealth. I am Neo, and today we are talking about the one place your future gets decided before the money ever leaves the room. Let us get into it.
Start with two people who look almost offensively ordinary. Same employer, same income band, same city, same basic middle-class adult life where the months are not glamorous, but they are full. Rent or mortgage, groceries, insurance, the normal stack. Nothing cinematic. No sudden inheritance, no crypto moonshot, no secret aunt who leaves somebody a ranch in Arizona. Just work. Paychecks, time. One of them is Yvonne. The other is Brett. And if you met them early, when the whole thing began, you would probably not have predicted anything dramatic. That is important because we are trained to think huge financial differences come from huge visible behavior. One person must have been a genius. One person must have built a startup. One person must have been eating dry lentils by candlelight while the other leased a German sedan and bought artisanal sadness in cup form every morning. Usually the story gets told that way because loud behavior is easier to see, but the real split often starts somewhere embarrassingly small. Yvonne did one thing on day one, not year 10, not after she read 12 books and became the final form of a disciplined adult. Day one, before the new salary had time to become normal, before her lifestyle could grow roots around it, before every dollar found a reason to introduce itself to her and say, "Hello, I already have somewhere to be." She signed one instruction, an automatic transfer. That is it. A boring, almost insultingly boring money move. Not after rent, before rent. Not after groceries, before groceries. Not after spending, before spending had a chance to pitch itself. That is the detail people skip. It did not live in the leftovers category. It was not, "I will save what remains if I am good this month." It was, "This amount leaves first because I said so once, and now the system is going to remember even when I don't feel noble." That is not motivation. That is architecture. And architecture beats motivation almost every time because motivation is a weather pattern. Architecture is a bridge. Brett, meanwhile, did what a lot of perfectly smart people do when they are trying to look financially engaged. He paid attention. Too much in the wrong places. He watched trends. He had opinions. He heard about hot stocks on lunch breaks. He waited for a cleaner moment to get organized. He kept telling himself he didn't want to do something automatic and boring before he had a smarter plan. And that sentence right there has ruined so much money.
I do not want to do the simple good thing yet, because I might eventually do the perfect clever thing. That is how entire decades vanish. Not in one obvious act of sabotage, just in repeated postponement, decorated as sophistication. Brett was not foolish. That is the uncomfortable part. He was thoughtful in exactly the way that often loses. He wanted context. He wanted confidence. He wanted the moment when saving would feel optimized. Yvonne did not wait for optimized. She signed the transfer and mostly looked away. That sentence makes people weirdly uncomfortable. Mostly looked away, because it sounds unserious. Shouldn't wealth be built by intensity? Shouldn't it involve dashboards and brisk nodding and one of those giant monitors with 6 charts on it? Apparently not. Apparently, one of the most powerful financial behaviors on earth is setting the instruction once and then refusing to relitigate it every payday. Let that sit. Every payday is a courtroom if you let it be. Every bill gets a lawyer. Every desire shows up in a tie. Every future goal gets delayed because some present tense expense is suddenly very persuasive. Automation does something almost rude to that whole process. It adjourns the case before it starts. The money leaves before the arguments put on makeup. And over the course of 1 month, that feels tiny. Over 1 year, still not very cinematic. But over 3 decades, now you are no longer talking about a habit. You are talking about an instruction that has been working a night shift for 30 years without asking for applause. That is how the gap opens. Not because Yvonne was an ascetic monk of money. Not because she never enjoyed herself. Not because Brett was lighting $100 bills on fire in the driveway. The gap opens because one of them put the future on payroll, and the other kept trying to remember it manually. And manual is fragile. Manual depends on mood. Manual depends on having enough left. Manual depends on the month not being weird. The month is always weird. That is one of adulthood's core product features. There's always a tire, a trip, a surprise fee, a dinner that went longer, a subscription you forgot, a week where you are tired enough to treat convenience like medicine. Manual savings has to win every one of those little debates. Automatic savings only has to win once, at setup. That is a completely different game. And after 30 years, Yvonne retires with around 8 times what Brett has. 8 times. Same broad income track. Same economy. Same normal life. The difference is not who cared more. The difference is who authored the instruction. Yvonne signed a standing order in favor of her future self. Brett left the signature line blank until every other claimant in his life had already signed first. If you only hear one thing from this half of the episode, hear this. Most people do not lose the wealth game because they never heard the rules. They lose because they left execution in the hands of their future mood. That is not a plan. That is a hostage negotiation with whoever you are on a random Tuesday, and Tuesday is not reliable. There is a reason the boring move wins so hard. It removes the most dangerous fiction in personal finance. The fiction that every paycheck arrives neutral. It does not. The second money lands, it enters an environment full of existing stories. This bill is urgent. This upgrade is deserved. This experience is once in a lifetime. This convenience is small enough not to matter. This month is unusual. This purchase is basically self-care. This thing is on sale, which is apparently how adults hallucinate profit while losing cash. If your future only gets what survives that arena, your future is not first. It is scavenging, and scavenging is not how wealth compounds. People love to say, pay yourself first, and then they immediately turn that into a motivational slogan instead of a mechanical order. No, take the phrase literally. First is not a feeling. First is a sequence. First is where the instruction sits in line, and sequence decides almost everything. If the transfer fires before your attention gets there, your attention no longer has veto power. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Because attention is expensive, decision-making is noisy, and you are trying to build a life in a world professionally designed to make your next click feel more urgent than your next decade. Of course, the boring signed instruction wins. It does not try to out-argue temptation in real time. It simply leaves before temptation enters the room. That is elegance,
And elegance, financially speaking, often looks like not much is happening. That is why it gets ignored. Boring systems do not flatter the ego. They do not make you feel brilliant. They make you richer quietly, which strangely is less marketable than making you feel brilliant loudly. No one sells a course called Set It Up Once and Then Go Live Your Life. That headline lacks jazz hands, but it works.
It works because signed instructions keep executing when enthusiasm goes home. Now, let me show you the same mistake at a much faster speed. Not 30 years. 1 summer. A giant event. A giant number. A giant emotional story. This time, the character is Tyler. Tyler hears what a lot of people hear when a mega event hits town. World Cup. Massive spending. Historic opportunity. Economic windfall. A number gets floated around like a parade balloon. $17 billion. That is the claim. A $17 billion boost. Jobs. Visitors. Growth. Energy. A tidal wave of money apparently about to wash through the economy, with everybody nearby invited to hold out a bucket. Now, if you are Tyler, this does not sound like a scam. That matters. Because most bad financial instructions do not arrive wearing a fake mustache and whispering from an alley. They arrive with a press release. They arrive with patriotic music. They arrive with official-seeming confidence and giant rounded numbers, and the emotional haze of everyone else already acting like the conclusion is obvious. Tyler hears 17 billion, and does what people often do when a number is large enough to stun the brain. He borrows certainty from the size of it. If the number is that big, surely someone serious checked it. If everyone is repeating it, surely the underlying instruction is legitimate. If the event is global, surely the local spending story is real enough to justify leaning in. So he leans in. He puts about $1,200 of ticket package spending on credit. Not because he is frivolous, because he believes he is participating in an economic moment. And this is where the signature line matters again. Who authored the $17 billion instruction running through Tyler's head? Who signed the paper he is obeying? Was it an independent party with no financial incentive in the story? Or was it the organization collecting the money? That is the whole trick. When a promotional number enters your life, always ask whether the person presenting it also benefits if you act like it is true. Because that is not a neutral number anymore. That is an invoice in costume. And Tyler does what millions of people do in smaller ways all the time. He mistakes a marketed outcome for a personal one. There will be a giant event. Therefore, it will be good for me. There will be money somewhere in the system. Therefore, some of that money will naturally justify my spending.
But money somewhere is not the same thing as money reaching you. That gap is where people get emptied out. Sophia, on the other hand, asks the annoying question, and I mean that as a compliment. Every financially stable adult eventually becomes annoying in exactly the right way. Sophia asks, where did that number come from? Not where did I hear it? Where did it come from? Who signed it? Who benefits if I repeat it? And what does an independent analysis say when there is no need to sell me the feeling? That is the whole difference between running your own instruction and running somebody else's. Tyler reacts to the front of the page. Sophia reads the bottom, and the bottom is less flattering because the loud $17 billion figure came from FIFA, the organization profiting from the event. Independent analysis from Boston Consulting Group put the actual economic activity closer to around $5 billion across all of North America. Not $17 billion for your city, not $17 billion descending specifically into Tyler's life like a money angel. Roughly $5 billion across a giant region with gains that are temporary, uneven, local, and slippery. That is already a very different instruction. But it gets worse. FIFA itself can net around $11 billion from the tournament. Meanwhile, public costs do not evaporate because the branding is festive.
Security alone gets publicly funded at scale, more than $600 million in federal security money, before you even start counting the local strain, cleanup, staffing, and all the secondary public costs nobody puts in the confetti trailer. So Tyler's purchase is not just a ticket, it is an obedience test. Will he act on the headline version of the number or the audited version? And here is the part I really want you to understand. This is not only about the World Cup. This is how seller-authored instructions enter your money life everywhere. A developer says the neighborhood is exploding. A university says this degree always pays for itself. A luxury brand says this piece is timeless. A lender says the monthly payment is manageable. A platform says this upgrade will save time. A conference says the room will change your life. A mega event says prosperity is coming. Maybe, maybe not. But if the person writing the number also benefits when you stop checking it, the instruction is not innocent. At that point, the question is not whether the story sounds exciting.
The question is whether you are about to sign someone else's order with your own money. Sophia sees that and does something beautifully unsexy. She buys one ticket in cash. One. She does not borrow to participate in a story. She does not confuse atmosphere with economics. She does not finance FOMO and call it opportunity. She watches the rest from a friend's couch, keeps the difference, and puts the money where it can actually belong to her future instead of to the event's marketing machine. Again, not glamorous. Again, more wealth-producing than glamorous. This is what keeps happening in both halves of the episode. The better move keeps looking smaller than the worse move. That is why people miss it. The signature that protects you rarely comes with fireworks. It comes with a transfer form, a limit, a refusal, a question, a pause, a line you read twice while other people are already halfway through checkout. The number that sells you. There is a mental bug that giant numbers create. Once a claim gets big enough, people stop treating it like data and start treating it like weather. 17 billion. Well, if it is that large, what am I supposed to do? Stand there with a calculator and a suspicious face? Yes, exactly that. That face is expensive in the short term and incredibly profitable in the long term. Because public numbers are often framed to create permission. Permission to spend. Permission to feel late. Permission to call the purchase reasonable because the scale of the event made it feel historically validated. But the seller never needs your purchase to be wise. The seller only needs it to be understandable. That is a brutal sentence. Your bad purchase does not need to be wise. It only needs to feel narratively justified at the moment of sale. And mega event economics are full of that trick. The money exists somewhere in the system, so people near the system assume some of it will naturally flow down into their personal finances. But systems leak upward, that is the point. The organization with the power, the licensing, the sponsorship deals, the broadcast rights, the control over the event, that is where the cleanest economics usually sit. Everybody else gets vibes and traffic and some hotel occupancy drama and a pile of local invoices. In fact, one of the ugliest little details in this whole lane is what happened during the 1998 France World Cup. Foreign overnight hotel stays actually dropped about 13% year over year. 13%.
The exact opposite of the casual fantasy. No meaningful retail boom to rescue the myth. That does not mean every event is useless. It means the story is not simple. And if the story is not simple, then your purchase should not be based on the simple version. That is what Sophia understands. She refuses to sign an instruction built from promotional certainty. Tyler signs first and audits never, and that order of operations is expensive. Again, sequence. Always sequence. People think financial intelligence is mostly prediction. A lot of it is authorship control. Who wrote the order you are about to obey? Who benefits when you stop reading? Who gets paid if you confuse a headline with a cash flow? The same mistake at two speeds. Now zoom out. Yvonne versus Brett. Tyler versus Sophia. At first, these do not look like the same story. One is about retirement and slow accumulation. The other is about event economics and hype. One is domestic, one is public and spectacle-driven. One is boring, the other one has jerseys. But underneath, they are identical. In both cases, money is obeying a signed instruction. In both cases, one person took ownership of the instruction and one person outsourced authorship without meaning to. Yvonne wrote, on purpose, a standing order in favor of her future self.
Brett left room for every other claimant to write over his paycheck in real time. Sophia insisted on reading the signature before she let the number move her. Tyler let the hype number function like pre-approved authority. Same error. Borrowed authorship. That phrase is worth keeping. Borrowed authorship. It is when your money appears to be under your control because you are the one tapping buy, but the logic moving your hand was written elsewhere, by an advertiser, by a seller, by a promoter, by a social norm, by the version of you that loves urgency and hates friction. And look, this is not about becoming paranoid and joyless. You do not need to interrogate every coffee or turn into the kind of person who treats a group dinner like a Senate hearing. Relax. The goal is not to become impossible. The goal is to become legible to yourself. When money moves, can you identify the signature behind it? Can you say, yes, this instruction is mine. I chose it with clear eyes. It serves a goal I still recognize. Or are you relying on emotional weather and institutional theater? Because if you are, the cost may not show up immediately. That is what makes this dangerous.
Brett did not wake up one month and watched 8 times the future evaporate in front of him. Tyler did not buy the ticket and immediately hear a cartoon cash register scream, "Error, seller-authored narrative detected." The penalty usually arrives later, quietly, as missing optionality, as extra balance on a card, as a future that had less room than it should have, as the realization that the money always seemed to have somewhere to go before it ever had a chance to become yours. That is the real loss, not the isolated purchase, the chain of unsigned obedience after it. So what do you actually do with this? Very simple. Before any recurring dollar moves, read the signature line, literally if there is one, conceptually if there is not. Ask 3 questions. Who authored this instruction? Who benefits most if it executes? And would I still sign it right now if nobody was rushing me, flattering me, or scaring me? That test alone catches an absurd amount of nonsense. Your automatic transfer to investments or savings? Good. That is your signature in service of your future. Keep it. Increase it when income rises. Protect its sequence. Make it fire before the rest of the month gets a vote. A major purchase justified by a giant promotional number from the organization selling the event? Slow down. That does not automatically make it bad. It does mean it has to survive independent scrutiny before it gets your signature. A subscription you signed 6 versions of yourself ago and now barely notice? Check whose problem it solves. A financing plan where the monthly number is presented first because the total price looks uglier in daylight? Read the bottom. A habit where your future only receives whatever survives the month? Rewrite the order. This is the thing people miss. Agency in finance is often not about choosing harder in the moment. It is about deciding earlier, more clearly, and then making the system obey the better version of you. That is what Yvonne did. That is what Sophia did. They did not become omniscient. They became authors. That is enough. You do not need a crystal ball. You need cleaner signatures. And if that sounds too abstract, reduce it to one line. Your money is always following instructions. Make sure the instructions are yours. That is the whole trick. Not more drama, not more apps, not more guilt, not another season of pretending the next burst of information will finally turn you into a flawless financial machine. You are not trying to become flawless.
You are trying to become structurally difficult to exploit. That is a much better goal, because the world is full of people who would love to pre-write your spending for you, sometimes with a beautiful interface, sometimes with a patriotic headline, sometimes with convenience, sometimes with aspiration, sometimes with urgency, sometimes with a giant smiling number that feels too big to question. Question it anyway, especially then. If you want a better financial life, stop focusing only on the amount and start examining the order. Before this dollar leaves, whose instruction is it carrying? If it is yours, good. Make it explicit, automate it, protect it. If it is somebody else's, slow the whole thing down until you can see the signature clearly. That one habit will save you from more damage than most people ever realize, because the biggest financial leak is not always overspending. It is unsigned thinking. It is letting borrowed narratives move your money before your own standards arrive. So sign your future first. Set the transfer. Read the promotional number twice. Treat giant claims like invoices until proven otherwise. And remember that when a dollar moves, it is never just spending. It is executing authorship. Make that authorship yours. I am Neo. This has been Modern Wealth. Read the signature line before the money leaves, and I will see you in the next one.